welcome Christy Everett, Hampton Roads Director for Chesapeake Bay Foundation. Thank you all for being here. I wanted to start just to get a sense of where you all come from. So our speakers have a little bit of a sense of what geography you're here from, and if you're here from local government or a nonprofit conservation entity, maybe an agency. So if I can just have a raise of hands, just first to City of Virginia Beach. Okay, City of Norfolk, Portsmouth, Chesapeake. Okay, this isn't a race. We're not going to win. And everyone's sitting together. Notice that. How about Peninsula, Hampton, Newport News? Okay, those tunnels are an issue. We're seeing that pattern, right? And then who are here as a citizen interested in this issue? A few, okay. Conservation, and I know sometimes people are conservationists and a citizen, so that's okay, but conservation or nonprofit? You. Okay, and how about agency or locality government? Okay, great. Well, I think we've covered our basis, so you've got a lot of audiences to speak to tonight. Thank you all again for being here. I know there is traffic and everyone has a busy life, and appreciate you taking the time to be here. Thank you also to Planetary, CMA, CGM, and Cox Communication for sponsoring this series. We also have Delegate Tata from the Virginia House of Delegates joining us tonight, so thank her in advance as well. And we are streaming this on Facebook Live, so no streaking across the front of the stage, okay? You've been warned, this will be recorded. People couldn't join us tonight, and so they wanted to make sure it was recorded, so we will share this out afterwards, which is nice as well. But seriously, and again, we created a little bit of a hot weather environment to remind us how important tree canopy is in the urban heat islands, but it really is a critical discussion for our area, as well as the state. Between 2014 and 2018, Virginia experienced a net loss of 9,548 acres of forest and urban tree canopy. Contributing factors include urban development and infrastructure expansion, infill development and suburban sprawl, tree diseases, saltwater intrusion in coastal areas, and homeowner tree removals. Canopy loss contributes to degraded waterways and Virginia's abilities to protect its residents from the impacts of climate change, such as inland flooding and negative health consequences of urban heat islands. So I want us to start by having a few opening comments from the speakers. Then I'll introduce them in depth, and we'll hear a presentation from each of them, followed by some Q&A. So if I can start with you, Carl. I told Carl no mic drops, and he's still a little bitter about it, but
I'm Carl Little from Fredericksburg, Virginia. My wife and I, back in 2008, established Tree Fredericksburg up there and started working with replanting trees in our urban forest. And tonight I'll talk about that a little bit to give you some ideas of what we faced, what we did, how we accomplished what we were able to over the years.
Hey, thanks for coming. I'm Ann Jurczyk. I am the manager of urban restoration here for CBI Virginia, and I will say the Littles have been mentors for me. I started planting trees in Hopewell in 2016 and have been doing it now in Richmond ever since then. So, you know, kudos to them. And yeah, I'm just thrilled that you guys are here, and I hope you're able to take at least one thing away that is helpful in your locality.
Good evening. My name is Daniel Ronald Brooks. I'm just some dude, so I'm happy to be here. Thank you so much for being here. I have the honor of serving the Commonwealth as the Community Forestry Specialist for the Virginia Peninsula, so a little bit outside of this range, but we're in my backyard right now. I grew up right over there on Great Neck Road. If you take nothing else away, if you have questions related to trees, contact your Community Forestry Specialists. We can either get you in contact with all of these wonderful people or with someone else who can help, or we might be able to help. But thank you so much for taking some time to be here.
Great, thank you. Tuesday. We're still going to have the presentations. Nice try, Daniel. We're first going to have Carl come up and present a few slides. Carl's originally from the small farming town of Fabens in far west Texas, just east of El Paso. He graduated with a bachelor architecture degree from Texas Tech University in 1970s, earned a Master of Human Resource Management from University of Utah while in the Air Force. 22-year career in the Air Force as Lieutenant Colonel, Information Technology Officer. Retired again in 2006 after 14 years working in the Office of Secretary of Defense in the information technology field. Carl's wife, Ann, and he, along with 3 other friends, formed the Virginia Bluebird Society in Northern Virginia. It now has 500 members, 5,000 nest boxes spread across the Commonwealth. Over the years, more than 500,000 chicks have fledged from these nest boxes. In 2008, Ann and Carl founded Tree Fredericksburg to pick up the word of tree planting, maintenance, and management in the city of Fredericksburg. They handled the city arborist functions for 15 years since the city, at that period, did not have an official arborist. They supported by a great dedicated group of tree stewards and thousands of volunteers. So far, they've planted 10,000 trees along the city streets, in parks, and on school campuses, watering, pruning, mulching, and maintaining them as needed. Welcome, Carl.
All right, thanks so much. Really appreciate it. As was mentioned, my wife and I started up Tree Fredericksburg back in 2007. And to this, I'm going to try to give you a little idea of some of the things that we ran into as we tried to help rebuild the urban forest in Fredericksburg. In 2007, the city was planting about 100 trees every year, but they were taking out about 200. So anyway, our streets were starting to look too much like the first picture there instead of like this. So we decided we needed to build a program to try to turn this around. And some of the things, if you're building a program of your own, some of the things you need to consider are political considerations, public relations, community buy-in into what you're trying to do, and get the technical knowledge down of how to pick the right trees for where you're trying to plant and how to actually plant them correctly and take care of them to make them grow. We learned a lot of this just by going to various different conferences and training courses, talking to all kinds of people, research on the internet and every place else we could think of. But slowly we started building up our knowledge, and then actually in doing the planting, we learned a whole lot. We made mistakes. We've made some good choices. You also need to get a lot of volunteers to help you out. As was mentioned earlier, we've had thousands of volunteers over the years help us plant. And then other support for that, plus funding. Funding is all important. Political considerations, you need to get to your decision makers, your city council members or county supervisors, whoever is in your municipality. You also need to go to various state agencies that can help you. City staff, you need to learn to work with them, get to know them, because you want to be value added to what they're trying to do day to day. And you don't want to be stepping on toes along the way. And also, you don't want to start something and then walk off and leave it as a mess that they have to clean up later. They don't appreciate that at all. You probably, if you don't already have one, need to establish a tree board or a tree committee. I'll talk about that a little bit more in a minute. They will interact with your staff and decision makers to help support what you want to try to get done. And then the more input you get from all over, from the community, from whatever sources, will help you in making the right decisions and the right choices. I mentioned the tree committee. In Fredericksburg, they established the Clean and Green Commission. The green part, there was a green committee under the commission, and that was the part that was handling trees. And when that group got together and started discussing and coming up with plans to how to start replanting, decided they needed an avenue to get more funding for the process to help augment the city budget and also get volunteers and organize and get the thing done. That's where Tree Fredericksburg had its origin, and we decided to form this nonprofit. Jumping back to public relations, there's all kinds of ways you can get out the word of what you're doing, and you want to be sure that you tell people what you're going to do, tell them what you've done, and then tell them again, so that they know who did these things for them and learn to appreciate it, and they'll start coming to you to get answers. But we use all kinds of things, handouts, newspaper articles, social media, and one year we got a grant from Cox Communications, which is one of the sponsors here. And we took these water bags, which were the tree gator type, to stand up. We started putting them around the trees, and we put our logo on there. So, so people would know that, they could see the new tree there and see the water bag, it caught your eye, and they would know that something is going on there. Then we also went to various tabling events, go to a farmer's market once a month in downtown Fredericksburg and have a table there and talk to people that are coming through. We've had classes on tree ID and pruning, various things of that sort, and then get in contact with various organizations throughout the city, such as the Rotary Club, the university, and different organizations within the university we have. Jumping to funding and grants, when we started working with the city, the tree budget was less than $85,000, but over the years, through political contacts, we got them to start building up that funding so that there's $85,000 in the city tree budget. Then we also got donations and some fundraising to bring in additional money, plus a great big part of what the money we were able to bring in was from various different grants, most of which we got through the state. We also got grants from Dominion Energy, Transurban, which built the express lanes between Fredericksburg and DC, and various other organizations. CSX Railroad gave us money. Over the years, we brought in nearly $600,000 in additional money to help augment what we were trying to do in the city. In the first years, we tried to be as high profile as we could, so we got noticed and so forth. One thing we did as far as our plantings, on a Saturday morning, we'd plant about 50 trees. Sometimes we'd use some balled and burlap trees. Sometimes, most of the time, we were using 15-gallon trees. But anyway, we'd pick a neighborhood and about 3 or 4 blocks within that neighborhood and then plant those 50 trees there. So all of a sudden, you had this forest coming up, and it was real noticeable. And then you had stories to tell to other people and to various different organizations when you went around talking about what you were doing. A couple other examples of things we did. On the upper left there, the veterans groups in the area decided they wanted to revamp the war memorial that they had there. There really wasn't very much there. It was a small little plot of land. There was a cannon that they had over on the side. They had a flagpole and one scrawny tree out there. But we started working with them and said, hey, you need some trees out in this project that you're doing. So we convinced them to plant some trees. Then a couple of years later, they came back and said, hey, it's just too hot out there for our Memorial Day events. Plant some more trees for us. So we did. We went back in and planted more. This is a little park right behind our house. And basically it was all grass and a few trees around the edge. The big trees you see there are not actually in the park. They're in the neighborhood, like my backyard. But in the place that was out there in the hot sun, in July, that was a real butt burner for the kids trying to go down the thing. So anyway, that was one of the first places we started planting trees. And back up a second here, wrong button. There's one tree here, I measured it the other day. We planted it in 2008, and now it's 65 feet tall. Thank you. One area in town is Washington Avenue. And there's this big grassy mall down the middle of it with a statue of Hugh Mercer you can see in the middle. And the garden clubs have this annual Arbor Day celebration. And they like to dedicate a newly planted tree to some specific person in the community that had done a lot towards trees and the environment. So they started would plant a tree on one side and put a matching tree on the other side. Then over the years, just worked our way down. So now it looks like just pictured in the lower right. We kind of modeled that after in Richmond, Monument Avenue, and the trees they have along the mall there. Downtown, we had a lot of Bradford pears down there and some maples that were kind of aging out and not doing well. And anyway, we got the city to rearrange their tree wells along there and space them so that they hit in between the cars, where the stripe is separating, so when you open your car door, you didn't bang into a tree. We also went back and started planting a different kind of tree that stayed narrow. They get about 15 feet wide total, so you don't have to be trimming them off the buildings all the time. The city was spending thousands of dollars every year going in there and trimming them off the buildings. We also got the city to start putting this artificial mulch in the tree wells, which is put in there is rubberized chips with a binder that holds them together, and it's permeable so water goes through it. But also you can walk over it, it's handicap accessible, and it made a lot of difference down there because a lot of our sidewalks are pretty narrow. This is the main commercial area downtown, and almost every tree you see there is one that we planted. And again, the narrow trees where we had to, if we had a wider space, we'd put a tree with a wider canopy. This is one of our trails in town. The upper left there, that was a couple of years after the first planting we put in there. We had a bunch of Cub Scouts that came and planted these 3-gallon trees in there. They were just little tiny guys. And then this is the way it looks today down here in the lower right. Another thing we've done is tree giveaways, and our tree stewards has been a big thing for us. Over the years, over the 14 years, we've given away about 57,000 trees. Some of them are saplings that we potted up, and some are like in 1 or 3 gallon containers. And at this point, we have about 70 dedicated tree stewards that help out with all of our operations. This is a couple of satisfied customers from our spring giveaway. We get these little saplings from the Virginia Department of Forestry, and we pot them up in these containers so that they have a chance of still being alive by the time the people get them home and get ready to plant them. In the fall, we have a bigger tree giveaway. These are 1 gallon potted shrubs, trees, all native plants, and some of them are in 3 gallon. But anyway, this year we were over ambitious and gave away 7,000 plants. Volunteer support, we get them from all throughout the community, all these types of organizations. On the left, that's our setup at the monthly, once a month at the downtown farmers market, giving information out to people that come through for the farmers market and just trying to help educate them. On the right is some of our tree stewards out for a pruning class. This is one of our tree planting volunteer activities on a Saturday morning. The one on the left, we were planting bald and burlap trees. One on the right is students in this neighborhood planting 15-gallon container trees. Again, up to the left, these ladies were planting a bunch of bald and burlap trees. There was a bunch of ladies from the local mosque, and boy, they were really good planters. They did a bang-up job. Lower left is a group on a confidence building type outing that they had. This was a local commercial company that sent their people out. This is a bunch of the high school students volunteering along this stretch of a pathway right next to a busy street. We wanted to put kind of a barrier along there to give a little separation. On the left is what it looked like when we flagged it for planting. On the right is what it looks like now. A couple of trees had to be replanted in there. You can see with the bags still on them because of an ice storm that we had. Last year, the city did a total inventory of all the city trees and counted about just over 15,000 trees in the schools, parks, and along the city streets. Fredericksburg planted about 47% of all those. And that's what I have.
Is anyone feeling inadequate right now? Yeah, it's okay. We'll get through this. I do want to recognize Delegate Ann Farrell Tata. She's in the back city of Virginia Beach. She has supported our legislation for trees, which I believe Ann is going to talk about. So this is a great intro. So I would like to introduce Ann Jurczyk. Ann is joined Chesapeake Bay Foundation full-time, started as a volunteer in 2010 as the Virginia Manager of Outreach and Advocacy. Her responsibilities included educating and engaging citizens in Save the Bay efforts and advocating for water quality legislation in Virginia General Assembly. Ann is currently the Virginia Manager of Urban Restoration. She's completed dozens of restoration projects, including designing and implementing buffers, living shorelines, tree plantings for parks and schools, vegetated swales, community gardens, and rain gardens. Ann is a certified Chesapeake Bay landscape professional, level 2 designer and installer, certified arborist, and is on the board of Trees Virginia, Virginia representative of Chesapeake Bay Program Stakeholder Advisory Committee. Ann spent more than 20 years as marketing executive for an international software firm before shifting her focus towards marketing the environment. She holds a degree in landscape horticulture and English from North Carolina State University and lives in Fredericksburg. And she drove Carl here too, so extra icing on the cake. So Ann, come on up and share your story.
So forward, yes. All right, I don't speak as loud, probably maybe as I should. Thanks again for coming. I really appreciate it. It's great to see so many friendly faces in the audience. And I'll get started. So most of the work that I do is in Richmond, and this is a map of 1937, and all the areas that are in red and are rated D. So these are formerly red line communities, and you'll see in just a second why that's important. But that rating of C or D meant that that they weren't being invested in, and as a result, that's why we're seeing some of the issues that we're seeing as far as urban heat islands. So in 2018, it was really before we had the phrase urban heat islands, and we weren't talking about it, and we weren't talking about equity or tree equity. Those phrases really weren't yet in our lexicon. It all really started with Dr. Jeremy Hoffman. He did research with the kids from Groundworks RVA. He had them literally riding their bikes through neighborhoods. So he got down to neighborhood census block level ambient temperatures. And when he did that, then University of Richmond was able to map those on the census block level. And so that's what created this, the urban heat island map that was that actually still is Richmond. So in 2019, all of a sudden, his research was published, and now lots of other cities are doing this research, but it actually all started in Richmond with Dr. Hoffman's work. So if you overlay that if you overlay the heat island map with the tree canopy map, what you see is all these light areas are where there is 0 to 6% canopy. Those are the same areas that were first, they were the red line communities, if I were to go back, and they were also the areas that are the hottest. And what he found out when he did the research was that there is as much as a 16-degree difference between the higher canopy areas in the city and those that have less canopy. Well, you guys, I'm sure you know this, but nationwide, heat is still the #1 killer, #1 weather-related killer. It beats out floods and everything else that, tornadoes. And so it's something that clearly we've got to address. But one of the things that Richmond found out, and kudos to the city, but they did a planning document called Richmond 300, where they were trying to evaluate, okay, what do we want the next 50 years to look like? And in doing that, they gathered a lot of feedback from a lot of, they broke into different stakeholder groups. But when Amy Wentz found out, she has a young daughter, and when she found out that the life expectancy of people who live in Southside, which is where she lives, was 20 years less than people that lived in other, wealthier, more affluent parts of the city, she's like, damn, I got to do something about this.
So she joined with Cherie, and the two of them started Southside Relief, and they'll come into play in a little bit more. So so CBF, we were very fortunate. We wrote a NIFWITH grant, and we said, okay, what can we do to help? We can't solve all these social and environmental problems, but we can sort of take a stab at it. And so the NIFWITH grant allowed us to do a lot of, I think, great projects. So an example would be, we started by approaching churches and other places that have really large unused parking lots, and said, all right, you're paying a stormwater utility fee to the city. We can help reduce that fee if you let us pull up these parking lots. And I took this picture almost immediately after this work was done. I'll say these river birches in the middle now are about, they're about 30 feet across. And that's where everybody parks, of course, is under the shade. So the church also had this basketball court that had not been used, and they're like, we don't want this either. Again, asphalt absorbs heat and slowly releases it back in the environment. At nighttime, that's when you really need things to cool off, but the asphalt really doesn't cool, right? So with this, we worked with the city of Richmond to say, hey, as part of your workforce development team, can you pull up this asphalt if we do your land disturbing permit for you? And so it was a win-win for them, because we paid their permitting fee as out of the grant. And what they did is we incorporated 4 inches of compost and 1 inch of biochar into the soil down to 36 inches. So we've got great infiltration here. And then we planted 75 trees per acre. Turned out to be about 40 trees in what was a basketball court. So now these trees are 10 to 15 feet tall. Same thing, we had another parking area, planted more trees. So altogether, this is compared to Carl, this is like nothing, right? But we planted about 800 trees as part of this work. I don't know, I was proud of it until Carl talked. Until I had to follow Carl a little. But we also planted just recently, this is in the spring of this year, we planted a tiny forest, and this is a really low-cost way to get a big bang for your buck, because the space that we planted was a 30 by 60 foot space. We put in 25 different species. These things grow approximately 10 times faster than if we had done a plantation style planting, right? The density of these trees, they're planted 4 trees per square meter, right? So roughly square meter, right? Imagine 1 on each corner. There's something to do with that mycorrhizal network under, what's happening underground. These trees are supporting each other, and they are just, this is the upper left-hand corner is a picture that was done in, as a stormwater practice up in George Mason's campus. The one on the left is an example that was in the New York Times article that sort of kicked off the idea to begin with. I was like, yeah, we could do that in Richmond. And they said, yeah, we'll let you do one. So anyway, the cool thing about this, they're also called Mikawaki forests, right? By the gentleman in Japan famous botanist who has done, hundreds of these. But there were so few in the United States, and at the time when we put ours in, there was one at UVA, there was one at Virginia Tech, and there was one at George Mason. So Richmond, we had the 4th one. Behind the scenes, all the things that have to happen, we are so fortunate, because in Richmond we've got the most amazing partner with the Parks and Rec Department. And what they do for us, I mean, those 15-gallon trees that Carl was talking about, you need somebody with a front end loader that's going to move those around, get them off that flatbed trailer, right? You don't do that without help. We need a place to store our biochar, right? CBF's got this little tiny office downtown. I'm not storing 20 cubic yards of biochar. The auger, they auger every hole for us. so that when volunteers show up to plant, that picture on the far right-hand side, that is a ready-to-go hole, right? We've already put the trees where they belong. The hole's been augered. There's the biochar and the compost has already been mixed into the soil. The flags are really just there so that nobody between the day we plant, between the day that we auger and the day we plant, so that nobody falls in the hole. But when a volunteer shows up, that's what they're just like looking for that. And yeah, our scenes, our plantings go pretty smoothly. So I probably don't need to tell you guys this, right? It is this amazing audience. I will say this picture was taken in Charlottesville, and this is the kind of stuff that just breaks my heart, because these are two pictures looking down the exact same road. And the reason that these trees were removed was because the construction company said that they needed clean access to the construction site. And so I asked Daniel, I said, so these were Quercus palustris pin oaks, and I'm just going, okay, how old do you think they were? And we were guessing they're between 50 and 75 years old. So in my lifetime, I'm not going to see anything. Like, no matter what we plant, we cannot fill this spot in the ecosystem again, like in my lifetime. It doesn't matter what we do. Rogard says it best. He goes, we can't plant our way out of this problem as far as an urban heat is concerned. And something else just for everybody, we talk about oak trees, and a 50-year-old oak tree or a 60-year-old oak tree as being, I don't know, middle-aged. No, it's an adolescent, right? I mean, oak trees live to be as much as 600, 800 years old. So they don't usually die of old age, right? They might die of diseases, and then they become more vulnerable as they get to be 700 years old. But these trees were adolescents. They had a whole lot more life to give. So just, share that with your elected officials, please. Just also, some people ask me occasionally in their backyard, they'll say, well, I just want to take out this one tree. Does one tree matter? And we talk a lot about the value of oak trees, right? In Doug Tallamy's work, where he says very clearly, he's like, each one of those oak trees, it supports up to 500 species of moths. Well, moths have caterpillars before they become moths, and that's what our birds need to feed their young, right? They don't like feed them spiders and crickets because there's too much, right? It's hard to regurgitate that. They want to feed them caterpillars. So, we need them to absorb carbon and air pollution and reduce flooding, all the benefits, but we have to start by preserving what we've got. All right. Another reason why we've got to preserve them is we are losing biodiversity. So the picture on the left-hand side, Carl will recognize these, right? These are Canada Reds, Prunus virginiana, that were planted. This is on the in Fredericksburg, on the street that I live on. So this is Brent, one street over is Stafford. So these trees have been here. They've been solid trees for 15 years, right? They were because when I moved here in 2015, these were youngsters. They're probably in the ground probably 5 years, right? They're probably in the ground about 15 years. They are all failing now. So it's like, why? Well, it's gotten really hot for them. In the upper right-hand corner is a northern red oak. We can't plant those anymore in Fredericksburg. They're really out of the range now because it's gotten too hot for them. And then, what's happening is that in our plant nurseries, they're not growing trees from seed anymore. They're largely doing grafts and they're cloning them. So what does that mean? It means we don't have the DNA and the trees that are doing the cross-pollination to adapt to climate change. We keep putting the same trees in the ground and they're not getting the opportunity to adapt. We've also got new diseases that are drastically cutting down our planting palette. In other words, the trees that we are allowed to plant. Everybody's heard of Dutch elm disease, and yes, we've developed some hybrids that are allowing us to plant that. But now beech leaf disease, like my favorite trees are beeches. And, now Richmond is saying, we're not sure we're going to be able to treat for beech leaf disease. It's expensive to treat for them. The green ash, right? The green ash borer. There's just so many trees that are slowly being taken away from us Again, the reason we have to preserve the healthy trees that we've got, we can't necessarily replace them with trees that we can get from nurseries. So when your advocacy most matters, if you're trying to protect trees, it's usually when you see this public hearing notice. We have so many people who approach us when they see the bulldozer coming down and knocking the trees down. Well, usually that's 5 years too late. If they've got a construction permit, they're ready to go. The only time that you've got as an advocate or the locality has any leverage is really when the builder is asking for either upzoning, right? Do they want additional density, or they want a waiver? And that's the only time really when we as citizens can ask for something different. So, you know, a couple of thoughts. These are three of the things that we are asking legislators to do. We really need to expand the Trees for Clean Water grant. Daniel's going to talk about that. But federal grants are definitely declining, and as a result of that, we're going to have to backstop that with some additional funding. We really want to encourage VDOT to first avoid cutting where they can, but to mitigate. Everybody who's been on 64, you know, if you're going from Richmond to here, you've seen, you know, 23 miles of, you know, destruction of canopy. And finally, we cannot have this tension between affordable housing and tree canopy. There's so much trying to pit these two desires against one another. It's not an either or, it's an and we can solve this problem. We can have density and we can have tree canopy. It's not, we keep trying to make it an either or, and it's not. So from one Lorax to another, I ask you to support our legislative ask. When Lisa Renee sends out an action alert and says, help us, please respond, go to your city council meetings, ask for stronger tree ordinances. They, in turn, prepare a legislative agenda that they talk to either, you know, they either talk to Virginia Association of Counties or the Virginia Association Municipal League. They make that ask, but they don't do it until they hear from you. Review your city's parking lot minimums, because that's something you can say, do we really need all that parking? Can we reduce that? Plant an oak or any native tree in your yard. And, you know, apply for a Trees for Clean Water grant. Volunteer with any NGO. Doesn't have to be CBF. It could be Tree Fredericksburg. It could be whoever, or become a tree steward. And that's all I got, folks. Thanks.
I don't believe that Ann Jurczyk has one favorite tree. Do you all? I'm going to call baloney on that one. Some of you all have found the questions. Thank you. On the bottom right of your program is a QR code, so feel free to add questions. There's some great ones in there. Don't feel like you have to, but it's always great to see what you all are wondering and want to hear from. I also, too, want to mention that Brooke Costanza, sorry, Brooke, to call you out, City of Virginia Beach arborist is here. So I don't know if she's going to hang out till midnight, but you might be able to catch her if you have specific Virginia Beach questions as well. So did want to mention that. But I want to bring up Daniel. Daniel Ronald Brooks is Hampton Roads native and arborist by trade. Listen to this statement. I don't know about this bio. After gaining incredibly marketable civilian skills as an infantryman and martial arts instructor in the United States Marine Corps. So again, do what he says. He was conned by a friend into dragging branches for a tree care company. Nearly 9 years later, he is now an ISA certified arborist, ISA qualified tree risk assessor, currently has the honor of serving the Commonwealth as a community forestry specialist for the Virginia Department of Forestry. Resides in Hampton Roads with his beloved furry companion, Athena, who's very cute. I think we have a picture, so stay to the end of the presentation. And with that, thank you, Daniel, for being here.
Oh, thank you, and thank you all again for being here. Really do appreciate it. Altis, thanks. I've done so much. I planted 16,000 trees myself, so no big deal. And if you believe that, I've got a few bridges to sell. Now, I represent the Virginia Department of Forestry. Specifically, I'm a community forestry specialist, which means I work with the community to advance the cause of urban forestry. But the Department of Forestry does a whole lot of different stuff that you may not think about. Who here has worked with the Department of Forestry in some way, shape, or form? Look at how many people are in this room and look at how many hands are raised. It is not a high ratio. Reach out to us. We're here. We're amongst you in the community. We have a lot of different options where we can help manage forests in a traditional method. We help do education through Smoky Bear and all sorts of tree-related technical education. We manage state forests and nurseries, which, to speak to Ann's point, which is a great point, a lot of traditional nursery growth is not focused on biodiversity anymore. It is focused on marketability. However, our state nurseries, they are focused on biodiversity. You have an active chance come fall to donate acorns, or Chinese chestnuts, and black walnuts to the Department of Forestry to help increase that biodiversity and make sure that Virginia trees continue to be grown in Virginia. So keep things like that in mind. There are a lot of ways that you can help. Here's a quiz. What's the most important part of the urban forest? No, look around. It's you. The urban forest exists with us. We are the reason that it is here. We are the stewards of the urban forest. If we do not care and take that responsibility seriously, it will not be here. Now, you will see all of this work, and Carl touched on it a little bit. They had a few different funding sources that they were able to access to get that work done, in addition to the hard work of volunteers and himself and Ann. Some of those are, as Ann mentioned, are starting to disappear. Virginia Trees for Clean Water is probably the best avenue for getting funding for planting projects. It is relatively limited in scope in that it does just focus on planting projects, getting trees in the ground in various ways. It can help fund tree giveaways, which is a good thing, a good way to get trees out in the community. But we have a few other grant opportunities that we'll go over. That's basically it. Mine's going to be relatively short and sweet here because I'm hoping that people will have questions and we'll talk in that way. Virginia Trees for Clean Water is kind of our bread and butter grant. It is funded by the General Assembly of Virginia. So as of right now, it is something that we will have access to in the future. You will notice that a lot of grants that were previously funded by the USDA are maybe not as accessible as they used to be. It can cover projects ranging from $1,000 to $50,000. It is a reimbursement grant. We do expect some sort of match, and that can be done in kind with volunteer hours, with supplies, all sorts of different ways. We're not trying to make money off of this grant. We're trying to make sure that we get trees in communities. It is a rolling application window, so you can start, I think it is after mid-January, we open up from our administrative break in between December and January. And you can apply at any point during the year as long as you give us a 30-day window before the project start date. And it can cover projects like planting riparian buffers, community and street tree plantings, tree giveaways, and a few other different projects. So our Urban and Community Forestry Grant was, well, it still is a large grant that's administered through the USDA that covers a broader range of projects. However, we are not really sure how that's going in the future. So, but what it has done in the past, it's provided matching grants up to $50,000 for projects that are a little bit less about planting trees, that might be more focused on invasive species removal, establishing urban forestry programs. For instance, we were able to utilize some of the Inflation Reduction Act funding to help communities in Petersburg, Hopewell, working with City of Newport News and a few other communities throughout the Commonwealth here, establish urban forestry programs. Because it is backed by USDA funding and federal funding is going to change, we'll see how that goes. It does have a limited application window compared to the Virginia Trees for Clean Water. It is usually late fall, and the other stipulation is that for Virginia Trees for Clean Water, almost any organization with a tax ID, whether it be homeowner association, church, anything along those lines, can apply for it. This one specifically has to be a nonprofit organization, like a government, tribal organization, something like that. However, we encourage, volunteer organizations to to apply with those sorts of organizations. Repairing Forests for Landowners is a grant program that we rolled out this in 2024 to try and help address some issues of former USDA grants not covering riparian plantings in small lots, essentially. But it's targeted at private landowners, and that includes civic leagues, homeowner associations, property owner associations, so on and so forth, to just try and get riparian buffers established. This one was pretty heavily based on fund availability from Inflation Reduction Act. We're hoping to figure out a way to roll that into our funding sources with General Assembly, but we have not released an official way that that's going to work yet. But stay tuned. It is something that we're working on. It does have stricter site requirements because it's aimed at specifically establishing riparian areas. It needs to at least be a 35-foot buffer. It can be up to 300-foot buffer. No more than 20% invasives present on site. There is a guarantee by the landowner to retain the area as a buffer for at least 15 years. Now, there are at least the other main partner grant that I know of to reach out to is in conjunction with the Department of Conservation and Recreation and the Soil and Water Conservation District group that they manage. Now, in Virginia Beach, who's your Soil and Water Conservation District? Virginia Dare, fantastic, exactly. That is who you would talk to learn more about the VCAP program. If you're ever on the peninsula in the city of Norfolk, you probably talk to Colonial Soil and Water. If you're in Suffolk and Sussex and Isle of Wight, I believe, that is the Peanut District. So, but with that, the VCAP program is administered by your local Soil and Water Conservation District. It's a suite of 12 different practices that help to mitigate rainwater runoff. They help to get conservation landscaping installed, remove impermeable pavement, that sort of thing. It is a reimbursement program. It can cover up to 80% of the original cost, depending on what the practice is. But again, I encourage you, contact your local Soil and Water Conservation District for more info on that. So the main question is, you've gotten all of this wonderful information. You have some fantastic inspiration. So what do we do with that? Who here is a master gardener? Who here is a master naturalist? Who here is a tree steward? Those are some of the things that you can do where you can put trees in the community. You can meet with like-minded people to try and figure out ways that you can advocate for these practices. We'll see if you can spot them in here. But this is a project over at Bassett Trace Trail in Colonial Williamsburg that was done by the Historic Rivers Chapter Master Naturalists. They worked incredibly hard to restore a part of history and show some educational value for the trees that were along there. This is Brickyard Landing, which is another project that was done by the Historic Rivers Chapter over and toward Williamsburg, where they took, as the name might give away, a former brickyard, and they made it into a demonstration garden with hundreds of native plants. And I'll throw a quick shout out because I do see some familiar faces out here. There's groups like the Friends of Indian River. There's groups like the Chesapeake Environmental Improvement Council. There's groups like the Hampton Clean City Commission. They're out there doing hard work of advocacy with local city governments. The best thing that you can do is form a relationship with your local city government so that you can get some of this work done. Virginia Beach is a very large city, so sometimes it's easy to lose sight of that we have some power in influencing the practices that go on here. But we do, and we have to take that power back. And here's information. Heather Gargano is your contact here in Blackwater. That covers southeastern Virginia. Caleb is over more toward Richmond, and then I'm in the middle here on the Virginia Peninsula. But there you go. And I guess we're doing questions later. So.
And that's Athena, his dog, if you all didn't know. Daniel, for people on Hampton Road South Side, should they contact Heather for more information on the programs you described? Okay.
You can always contact me. I like to talk to you.
Okay. Well, we've got some great questions from you all. I had some, but they were just okay questions. Your questions are better. So we're going to rip up mine and answer yours. And again, please feel free to add them. I think the speakers would love to see what you all are wondering, but we will be here till midnight if we try to tackle them all. So let's tackle just a few, and then want to hear some closing remarks from the speakers as well. This is more of a clarifying question, and you all have your mic on. Okay, great. What is a riparian forest?
Look out here. Pine trees. It is a buffer of vegetation, or riparian forest, and specifically as a forest, but a buffer of vegetation between water and a more inland or upland forest.
Great. Can we save tree-free seedlings from our yard for giveaways? This is a good question.
Sure, that'd be fine. We've done some of that ourselves. Out in our yard, we have some holly trees there, and we've dug up a bunch of holly trees, also some red buds, potted them up, and then handed them out at giveaways. But yeah, perfect.
So Carl, walk us through that. If these guys going to go home, they're going to dig up some seedlings, and they're going to call you. What's the next step once they do have seedlings?
Well, find you some small pots to pot them up in, and a good planting medium to put them in. If it's just going to be a short time, you can use some really fine ground, fine bark mulch. But if it's going to be longer, you probably want more of a planting medium like you'd buy at one of the box stores around. And could, fairly decent potting soil. Or if you have some good soil in your yard, you can use that. That's a little heavier to carry around if you have a whole bunch up to manage. And then keep them watered, and wait for whenever your period is that you want to give them away.
And give them to a friend or neighbor.
Give them to a friend or neighbor.
Yeah, okay.
Sell them at the farmer's market, make some money to support other things.
Great, thank you. How can a young person, go ahead, yes.
I was going to say, just as a second thing, talk to master naturalists, master gardeners. It is not uncommon for them to maintain a nursery internally. They might be, did you have a question or comment on? But it's not uncommon for them to maintain a nursery of some sort. They may be willing to take some of the seedlings offhand and do something with them. But yes, so we collect acorns, Chinese chestnuts, and black walnuts of various species.
And should people contact Heather if they're wondering about participating in the acorn collection program in the South Side, or
Yep.
you in the peninsula? Okay.
Exactly. Yeah, South Side, talk to Heather. I'll put as much work as I can on Heather, Easy. She's not here. But otherwise, feel free to reach out to me. We'll get it coordinated. So.
And Daniel mentioned that there's a few different groups in the communities: Hampton Clean City Commission, Keep Norfolk Beautiful, Virginia Beach Clean City Commission, as we have Brooks here. If you need those specific contacts in your localities, we do have contacts with some of those. So feel free. I think I sent you the parking information for tonight, so I'm in your inbox somewhere. We can also connect you or find a way to connect you to some of those groups.
And that's a large part of what Heather, Caleb, and myself are here for. Connect you with people who can connect you with what you need.
Great, thank you. How can a young person get started in a career that would assist in saving trees?
Go drag brush.
Volunteer. I mean, seriously, I sort of volunteered my way into CBF, in 2010. I designed a living shoreline, and it just happened to be something that, was replicable, and CBF hired me. I was lucky, but I proved that I really, really wanted the job. I gave them hours and hours designing and implementing a living shoreline, applying for a grant. And when it was funded, I sent the note to, Chris Moore and Ann Jennings, our executive director. And I said, if you ever want somebody who can get stuff done, I'm available. And, 6 months later, they did finally call me. So it absolutely, I tell every young person, if you're trying to make a career change, a lot of teachers, for some reason, want to change careers, but they'll call me and I'm like, volunteer your way into the job, because it's amazing how much you learn from people that you're working side by side with, right? They're a wealth of information, and pick their brains because they're willing to share.
Another thing that we've done also, we've had young kids come and volunteer with us over several years, and then later on, they put us down as a reference, and we send references to whoever they're trying to get employed with. It's a good source.
Great, thank you. This one's not as inspiring. Why do some people want less trees? Trees help keep our environment healthy. And I think I'll put a little twist on that and say, what do you do? I think everyone probably likes trees in this room, I'm guessing. So when we're, back in our communities and neighborhoods and someone's complaining about a tree, they're taking down a tree, how do we educate or inspire or share the value of trees with people who may not be as interested in caring about trees as we are in this room?
Sometimes that's pretty difficult to talk people into it. Usually the complaint we got when we were trying to cite trees along the street was, well, it'll drop leaves in my yard. Okay. Usually I tell them, yeah, just wait a little while, they'll blow to your neighbor's yard. No problem. But a lot of times it's just a matter of getting enough peer pressure from other neighbors that, hey, we want trees here. And then we've had some like landlords that had several houses in the neighborhood. They didn't want the trees because they'd have to be involved with the maintenance of them. And it's tough to overcome, but hopefully we can get tree ordinances that say you have to in the city you have to have a tree every so many feet along the curb. That at least gets some in.
I would say in Richmond, before we plant street trees, we go literally door to door with door hangers and we say, we're planting on XYZ date in this community. And if you don't want a tree in front of your house, you let us know. And if they call us or if they email us, then we don't put a tree there. Like Richmond's got 77,000 trees and they've got something like 4,000 empty large tree wells. No reason for us to pick up somebody that doesn't want a tree in their yard. You just go to the next, tree well. But what we hear is frequently, it's the whole right tree, right place. If you there are definitely trees that will send roots into the sewer systems that will buckle sidewalks. There are also trees that will not do that. And you just got to be careful which trees you plant as your street trees and be willing to have those conversations. If your city does not have enough resources to maintain the trees they have, it makes your advocacy a little bit harder because, if the neighbor is saying, well, you, the homeowner, are responsible for mulching and watering the tree and picking up any dead limbs. And by the way, there's that huge dead limb and I can't afford to get it removed. I mean, that's a fiscal responsibility that nobody wants to have, or particularly in some of these communities where we're working in. Folks don't have $500 to get a bucket truck out there to give a large limb off of a tree. One of the things that was piloted in Charlottesville was a program that was able to take money for the Trees for Clean Water and use that in a maintenance capacity. And what they did is they have an arborist on staff for Charlottesville Relief who will go and assess the tree, and then they will go and do the maintenance for free. And that's particularly in underserved communities because they're trying to plant communities, but you can't plant new trees if you're not maintaining the ones that you've got. So it's a little bit of the proof is in the pudding. They've got to see that you're doing the work before they're going to allow you or be willing to have you plant something new.
Yeah, sometimes it's just tough, man. Some people are not going to want trees in their yard. They're going to want to deal with me talking. They aren't going to want to deal with branches. They're not going to want to deal with leaves. Something that we often used when I was more in production arboriculture, because we talked ourselves out of more jobs, than we probably did at some point, was to impart on people that it's cheaper to hire someone. If the leaves are the issue, it's cheaper to hire someone to clean up the leaves than it is to take the tree down. And we are getting better at quantifying the benefits of trees in a way that helps people understand that it's not just something that helps their pocketbook, although it does. So, yeah, it's just relentless attrition. That's how we do it, I guess.
Some of those infantryman skills, I think you learned, yeah. And we do have a lot of numbers to help support the increase in property values, the reduce in energy costs from energy savings from air conditioning, things like that. So if you need those numbers, we live and breathe them. So let us know, and if that might work with some of your folks in the argument. which grants are probably best for municipalities to be going for these days? And many people are citizens, but they can let their city council know, let their city staff to apply for these.
Well, if you've heard one throughout all of our conversations here, it's Virginia Trees for Clean Water. That one it's backed by the the General Assembly of Virginia. It's not tied to federal funding. It's pretty stable right now. So if you have any further questions about it, you want to see if your community is eligible for it, you want to encourage your government to talk to one of us about it, just reach out. We're here to talk about it. So.
Yeah, one other one, I think there's the National Fish and Wildlife Foundation, right? They usually those grants open up in May. The solicitation, the RFP, comes out usually the 1st of May, and they're usually awarded in October. There are both planning grants and implementation grants. I will say, because they're federal grants, that you've got to have somebody from a fiscal agent perspective who's willing to count the beans on the back end. So it's not for lighthearted, and it generally is not for smaller nonprofits, just because of the administrative overhead. But the funding is usually upwards of $500,000. So and many of those require match. And in the case of the NIFWITH grant that we did, the Greening Southside grant, the match was largely from the city of Richmond, because again, they brought staff and equipment as match, and CBF applied for the grant as the lead. Yeah.
We've used the Virginia Trees for Clean Water grant process for a lot of the funding that we've gotten for our work, usually asking for grants in the range of 10 to 15,000 for our tree planting, our tree giveaways, and things of that sort. They've got a pretty nice online tool now for submitting your grant request and putting all your data in, and it's not too hard of a chore, not a whole lot of paperwork that you have to gin up. But we've been real successful with that.
Great. We have a lot of wonderful questions still, but I know 2 of you have to drive back to Fredericksburg, where there's lots of trees tonight. So I'll stop us here. I do want to hear some closing comments from each of the speakers. Raise your hand if you did not get an evaluation when you checked in. Okay. Jessica can hand you out one. We've got a few. She can also collect them, but if you, okay, that'd be great. But with that, can you all, any closing remarks? I'm sorry, I forgot one. It's not a question, but one of the comments, this is to Ann Jurczyk, the angels are rejoicing in heaven when one tree is planted. So that's my closing comment, but I'll turn it to you all for yours.
Yeah, I don't have a whole lot more to add, other than, if any of y'all have questions that we can answer later on, just get in contact with us. We're glad to give you lessons we've learned from our experience, and maybe you can apply it to successfully do programs in your areas. And trees are the answer.
Yeah, ditto on trees are the answer. Real quickly, the reason that my husband and I chose to live in Fredericksburg was the work that these guys did. Right, we just had to live somewhere where we could get on the VRE to go to DC. Right, my husband worked for NASA, and that's all we needed. We just needed access to the train, so we could have lived in Spotsylvania County, Stafford County, or Fredericksburg, because I was driving to Richmond. Right, and we would just need to split the difference. Right, but literally, it was when we saw all the trees that were planted in Fredericksburg. It was like, that's where we want to live, and that's why we live there. And I've said that story to many of our city council members to say, we're paying taxes here. We chose to live here because of the work that you guys are doing to support tree canopy in our community. So hats off to Tree Fredericksburg, but that's also a story you can tell your city council person.
Exactly. In this room, ditto. In this room, you have a lot of people who have put a lot of work into making projects into reality. talk to those people, find inspiration with those people, see how you can do that as well, or see how you can help them do that. Whatever the case is, each one of you has immense power in making trees happen in our communities. So take that responsibility seriously. Take that call to stewardship seriously. Trees are the answer. It's not Trito, I guess, but we can pretend.
Well, join me in giving a round of applause to these amazing inspiration and resources here.